It's BBC World News. I'm Lola Diseko. Our top stories. Thousands take to the streets of Barcelona as the Catalan leader makes a passionate appeal for the defence of Catalonia's rights.
This is the worst attack against the institutions and the people of Catalonia since the military dictatorship of General Franco.
Millions of people in Japan vote in a snap general election. We'll have the latest live from Tokyo. The billionaire businessman who scored a convincing victory in the Czech Republic's general election. And a show of unity in Texas. 5 ex-US presidents team up for a concert to benefit victims of recent hurricanes. Hello and a very warm welcome to BBC World News. The Catalan leader, Carlos Puigdemont, says that Spanish authorities' attempts to strip the regional government of its powers are an attack on democracy. Tens of thousands of people gathered in Barcelona on Saturday to protest against the Spanish government. The Prime Minister, Mariano Rajoy, said he'd been left with no choice. Tom Burridge reports from Barcelona.
Angrier than ever before, Catalans who want independence digesting Madrid's unprecedented move to temporarily scrap their devolved government.
Just want to crush us down, and we've got dignity. We've got our dignity. We've fought for it for years. We couldn't speak Catalan only like 40, 50 years ago. Are we going back to that? I want to see the army here. We're going to see it at this rate. I don't want that.
I'm young and I don't have that much knowledge, but I have enough knowledge to know that that isn't normal. This shouldn't be happening in our country. We are a developed country. This is just outrageous. I'm speechless.
The leader of Catalonia's devolved government in the crowd. Tonight he called it the biggest attack on Catalonia's autonomy since the dictatorship of Franco.
This is the worst attack on the institutions and people of Catalonia since the dictatorship of Franco.
Earlier, Spanish ministers approved what's known here as the nuclear option. In a few days, Catalan autonomy will be suspended. The regional government sacked. All of its responsibilities run from Madrid. Prime Minister Rajoy said Catalan leaders will not be allowed to destroy the whole way in which Spain is governed.
We apply Article 155 because no government of any democratic country can accept disregard for the law.
Catalonia is divided on the issue of independence. And some here, like Carlos, accept that the Spanish government had no option. He says it's 50% Madrid's fault and 50% Catalonia's government for causing this crisis. A crisis which seems to be getting worse. They won't give up, even as European governments insist this is an internal issue for Madrid. The key test will come when Madrid tries to physically take control of the Catalan authorities. Will the Catalan police and other local officials follow the Spanish government's orders or disobey? A new country won't appear through words, even as they will it to happen. They know too that bearing down on them is the all-powerful Spanish state.
Tom Burridge reporting there. All right, let's go live to Madrid and our correspondent Guy Hedgecoe now. I mean, it seems like the positions are becoming more and more entrenched. What options does the Catalan regional government have now?
Well, he doesn't have much time to decide because quite soon he could be out of a job once these measures are approved by the Senate, which is expected probably by the end of next week. So the feeling is what he could do is either call elections in Catalonia in the next few days. That would be perhaps a more conciliatory alternative for him because the Spanish government wants to call elections there anyway at some point in the near future. Or there's a feeling he might declare independence. He has said he's going to call a session of the Catalan Parliament in the next few days, and that in that session they will discuss a response to the triggering of Article 155. That response might possibly be a declaration of independence.
If that happens, then what?
Well, that presumably would further escalate this crisis, and then we're certainly into uncharted territory. But the Spanish government then would obviously push ahead with its plans to take direct control, but it would be in an environment that would be much more tense, more conflictive, and it would seem even more difficult for the Spanish government to follow through on the logistics of taking control of the Catalan government institutions.
I mean, what is happening kind of behind the scenes to try and talk people down? It seems incredible.
Well, there does seem to have been an incredibly small amount of contact between the two governments in Barcelona and Madrid. Now, there are reports of some kind of contact, but it seems to have been fairly minimal, and both sides have allowed things to get to this stage, to this situation, this late in the day, when we're really in a sort of an emergency situation in terms of the relationship between the two. There are believed to be some kind of contacts going on. If the Catalan government did call an election, then that perhaps might enjoy the support of the Spanish government. It would be, one of the few options it would take, which might enjoy the support of Madrid. But otherwise, things look like they're going to escalate.
All right, Guy. Difficult situation, but thank you for bringing us up to date. All right, let's have a look at some other stories making news now. And two of Italy's northern regions are holding referendums on autonomy today. Between them, Lombardy and Veneto account for about 30% of Italy's wealth. The governors of both regions are from the Northern League, which argues that the north is subsidising Italy's poorer south. At least 15 army cadets have been killed in an attack on a military academy in Afghanistan. The suicide bomber drove a car full of explosives into a bus outside the training centre in Kabul. The Taliban said it carried out the attack. It is the latest in a number of bombs across the country this week. French prosecutors have charged 8 men, including 3 teenagers, in connection with a plot to target politicians and mosques. The suspects are accused of links to the leader of a far-right group called the OAS. He was arrested in June after making threats on the internet to attack black people, jihadists and migrants. The new head of the World Health Organization says he's rethinking a decision to appoint Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe as a goodwill ambassador. Britain and the United States have expressed their disappointment, and the opposition in Zimbabwe has called it a joke. But Robert Mugabe's supporters said it was a fitting tribute. Millions of people in Japan are casting their votes in a snap general election called by the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. If Mr. Abe wins, it would be his 4th term in office. Well, let's go live to our correspondent Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, who's in Tokyo for us. Rupert, for many people it might seem an odd decision to call this general election. Why now?
Well, it is an odd decision in that Japan doesn't need to, or Prime Minister Abe doesn't need to call an election for, well, more than a year, actually. We're only 3 years into the current term. And actually, opinion polls show that most Japanese people, as many as 2/3 of Japanese people, didn't want the election now. Nevertheless, this risk of going early appears to be paying off for Prime Minister Abe. It does look at the moment as if he and his Liberal Democratic Party are heading for a considerable majority in today's election, and that would give Mr. Abe a record 4th term as Japanese Prime Minister, and potentially he could become the longest-serving Prime Minister in post-war history.
It would also allow him, if he wins, to make the changes to the constitution that he's wanted to, particularly the clause over Japan's status as a pacifist country.
That's right. So Mr. Abe has called this election in part because his popularity has risen in the last few months, but it will give him a last 4-year term, and that he has said, if he wins today, he will see it as a mandate from the to fulfill his sort of lifelong quest, which is to change Japan's post-war constitution. Mr. Abe and many of his supporters on the right of Japanese politics see the pacifist constitution that was imposed on Japan after the war by the Americans as a humiliation, and they have long wanted to change it. Now it appears that Mr. Abe may have an opportunity, with two-thirds majorities in both houses of parliament, to go forward and really push to change the constitution. It would have to go to a referendum of the Japanese people as well, but he certainly looks like he's got the best chance he's ever had if he wins big today.
Interesting times. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes in Tokyo for us. Thank you. A Eurosceptic billionaire businessman in the Czech Republic has won the general election. Andrej Babiš, the country's second richest man, got 30% of the vote. It's not enough to govern alone, but he's far ahead of his rivals. Rob Cameron has more from Prague.
This is what success looks like for a man who has already tasted so much of it. His business empire controls much of Czech agriculture, chemicals, and the media, but now he's set his sights much higher. After almost 4 years at the finance ministry, the Slovak-born business tycoon is on the brink of becoming prime minister.
I've already congratulated all the chairmen who got into Parliament, and we hope that they will be willing to deal with us. I think it would be good to have a stable government for our country which will fight for our interests.
It was a result few had predicted. Andrej Babiš's prospects had dimmed in recent months after a string of scandals, 2 separate criminal investigations into claims he fraudulently obtained EU funds for a luxury resort. He said all of that was a campaign against him, a political witch hunt by an establishment terrified of his pledge to clean up corruption. Trust me, he said, and the voters believed him. Populist, mildly Eurosceptic, and hostile to immigration despite his non-Czech origins, he's left the established centre-left and centre-right parties in tatters. Instead, a host of new protest parties, including the far-right SPD. They want to ban Islam in the Czech Republic and also hold a referendum on leaving the European Union. They're unlikely to get one, but attitudes are hardening here to the EU and to migrants, and Andrej Babiš has tapped into them. Rob Cameron, BBC News, Prague.
Now to America and a plan to release secret files about the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963. The BBC's Laura Bicker has the latest.
They were locked away 25 years ago by law to try to quell conspiracy theories surrounding the assassination of President Kennedy. It didn't work, because a recent survey suggests around 30% of Americans believe that the man accused of murder, Lee Harvey Oswald, did not act alone. He, of course, was shot and killed before he had his day in court. Now, the files that historians really want to pore over surround Oswald's visit to Mexico City just a few weeks before the assassination. It's there he met with Cuban and Soviet spies, and it's alleged he announced his intention to kill the president, although that has not been made a fact as yet. Now, when it comes to these documents, they will be released on Thursday unless President Trump says otherwise, and his tweet suggests that he will, unless a strong national security argument is made. So decades of secrecy might be about to come to an end.
Do stay with us on BBC World News, still to come. Bringing back the body art of the Soviet-era underworld, we meet the new generation of Russia's tattoo enthusiasts. Headlines. Thousands take to the streets of Barcelona as the Catalan leader makes a passionate appeal for the defence of Catalonia's rights. Millions of people in Japan are voting in a snap general election. Prime Minister Abe promises to continue his tough approach towards North Korea. Parts of Britain have been battered by Storm Brian with violent winds and high seas. Gusts of more than 120 kilometres an hour recorded in some places. Warnings of strong wind and flood alerts are still in place in some areas. Bryony Williams reports.
Storm Brian unleashes its worst as waves crash against the coast of Wales. The ferocity of nature showing its hand.
Just taken the whole side of the RNLI offices out.
Buildings damaged and roads flooded. The picture in the southwest of England is similar. Beaches empty. Advice from the Environment Agency has been to stay away from the coastline. But walkers in the northwest of England couldn't resist watching the awesome scenes Storm Brian has supplied.
Fantastic. Power of nature, isn't it? I was hoping to go for a nice coastal walk this morning or today, but I think I'll put that on hold.
The disruption hasn't been as widespread as predicted, and Storm Brian is expected to ease over the coming hours. Only then will the true impact be revealed. Bryony Williams, BBC News.
All 5 living former presidents of the United States have teamed up for a benefit concert in Texas for the victims of a recent hurricane. Jimmy Carter, George Bush Sr., George W. Bush, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama all appeared together on stage for the national anthem. The ex-presidents have led an appeal that so far raised more than $30 million. Bill Clinton had this message for Americans.
There is still work to be done in Texas and in Florida. And our friends in Puerto Rico and the American Virgin Islands have only begun to dig their way out of what could be still a calamitous disaster, but can be a new beginning if we just do what we ought to do and prove that the heart of America, without regard to race or religion or political party, is greater than our problems.
Well, before going to the concert, former President Jimmy Carter told the New York Times he would be willing to travel to North Korea on behalf of the Trump administration to help diffuse rising tensions. He said he'd spoken to Mr. Trump's National Security Advisor, General H.R. McMaster, on the matter, and Mr. Carter, who's age 93, said Washington was overestimating the influence of China on North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un. The German Paralympian Angelika Trabert has won 24 medals on a horse. When she's not riding, she's helping save lives. We spoke to her about her life and her future ambitions.
If I sit on a horse and if the horse really understands me, I'm just free. I'm free in a way I can never be while I sit in a wheelchair or while I walk with artificial legs. There's nothing